First, just an overview, please. Could you discuss the proper terms, Romani, all those issues, Gypsies, quoting, and the delineations of the various Gypsy groups? I mean, I'm ignorant. Most Americans are ignorant about that.
Okay.
Please.
Well, the population that is popularly referred to as Gypsies numbers about 12 million throughout the world, divided into very many subgroups. We don't care for the word Gypsy, partly because it's based on a historical error. The word comes from Egyptian, and our ancestors aren't from Egypt. And secondly, the word has been taken over by novelists and Hollywood and so on, and projects a very distorted picture. Even dictionary entries under Gypsy give a picture that really we'd rather not be stuck with, an image we'd rather not be stuck with. We call ourselves Romanis. The plural increasingly now is Roma. Sometimes that's used as a singular too. He is a Roma. Sounds a little odd to us. Partly too because not all Romani populations refer to themselves as Roma. Nevertheless, it's better than Gypsy. So this is what we use.
Per the Holocaust now, and the museum and so forth and so on, I have some general questions and then some specifics. I'd like to talk about some of your quotes, if you could elaborate, please. But okay, for starters, most in the Jewish community have actively sought to delineate Jewish suffering in World War II from all other groups. Do you have any speculations on why that is? What's involved?
The Jewish experience, practically from day one, has been horrible. It's been one of oppression and rejection and genocide. And the Jewish culture, if you like, Judaic culture, is also exclusive. It excludes non-members, if you like, just as ours does. And this doesn't make you friends. And so you become self-involved, especially, and this is something we share, if you have no country, you're pushed from pillar to post, and there's nobody out there who's going to help you. You have to help yourself. And if that's been going on for centuries, you do become self-centered. And it is understandable that the Jewish victims of the Holocaust and some Jewish historiographers would see this as an exclusively Jewish event in history, the Holocaust. Almost all of the literature on the Holocaust is the product of Jewish scholarship, and so understandably, again, those scholars have focused on the fate of the Jewish victims. It's also true that what little we have on the Romani Holocaust is also the result of Jewish scholarship. So we have to be grateful for that. What we find, what I find certainly, is that Jewish journalists, even authors, who know nothing at all about Romani history or the Romani, the treatment of Roma in the Holocaust, nevertheless have mindsets that how can it be? Even how dare you? We have been called all kinds of horrible things, that we're trespassing, that it's an insult to the Holocaust to be associated with it. But this is based on ignorance, and what I found is that when those who are interested, and mostly it's Jewish people who are interested, when they learn the facts, they become very sympathetic and surprised. I hear, I never knew, quite often. And we are changing. Also, as we get further away from the Holocaust and the survivors are gradually passing on, it's taking a different place in our history. What has been said many times since 1945 is that if we don't heed this, if we don't learn a lesson from this, it's going to happen again. We're going to have other genocides, and we have. That's the whole point. It's as though we haven't learned anything. There's been the Cambodia and Darfur and so on. And so Holocaust scholarship is in a state of change now. And the uniqueness argument, yes, there were other targeted groups, but only Jews stand alone. The number of scholars who argue for this is diminishing, and also their rationale is not so much based on historical facts anymore, but on perhaps religious ones.
May I interrupt 1 second, please? I'm sorry. I don't like what this is. I'm sorry. This will be better. Much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Yep. Okay.
That still leaves us with this obnoxious business of who qualifies and ranking victimhood, which is not a pleasant thing. If we're talking about human beings, then it affects everybody. My approach, and the approach of a number of others, is to interpret the Holocaust as a massive program of ethnic cleansing, because Hitler wanted to create a master race. He felt that the Germanic gene pool was being contaminated, polluted. And the two populations that he went after were Jews and Roma, that he, or the Nazi documentation spokesman, referred to as the Asiatic elements in Europe, the two outsider groups. If we take that approach, then we can also understand why he wanted to get rid of handicapped people, mentally, physically, especially mentally, and even for that matter gay men, because they too were referred to as genetically flawed. So if you look at it like that, you can see that there really was this idea of getting rid of contaminant populations to create a master race. To that end, the name of the policy that was put into effect was the final solution, as you know. There was only the final solution of the Jewish question, the final solution of the Gypsy question. There were no other final solutions, no reference to the final solution of the Jehovah's Witness question. And these were genocidal programs with the intent to eradicate. We come back to numbers. That's often used as an argument. Well, there were so many more of us than you, so we count more. True, but the numbers were greater to start with before all of this began. So the end result numbers are going to correspondingly not match.
I'm sorry, forgive me. I have to get this out. Should be the other way. Let's see. That'll do it. Okay.
Okay. What we ought to be doing, since the numbers were not the same is look at percentages of losses. That gives a truer picture. If we're talking about genocide, we're talking about the destruction of specific human groups, and the percentage is about the same by 1945 of Jewish and Romani losses. There is, from a few, very few Jewish scholars, the religious argument that their case differs because it was a divine act of destruction. Most Jewish scholars reject that one, and I think it doesn't hold up, although it's not for me to say. I think the bottom line is people, A, there's been a lack of documentation, B, very few Roma are scholars and have been able to come forward and talk about it, much less write about it, and C, the Hollywood gypsy just gets in the way. And we're not taken seriously. Most Americans think we're not an ethnic population. They think we're a behavior. And for that reason, there are other populations that are called gypsies. There's even a TV show, The Riches. It's about Irish Americans, but they're referred to as gypsies. And my students ask me, can I use this program to base my term report on? And I have to say, no, they're not Romani people. They have quite different history. They're Europeans. Our roots are in Asia.
Could you discuss, please, at length, you have a lot of, you note that the National Holocaust Museum has been particularly abrasive, you didn't say that exactly, but in its treatment of Romani suffering under the Nazis. Could you elaborate on that? What's going on?
At the moment, we are not getting the insults that we used to get. The first appointee was William Duna, someone you should speak to. I talked to him on the phone last night and told him about you. He lives in Minneapolis. The history of our membership on the council goes back quite a way, and I've written about it. And it was really stimulated by Wiesenthal, Simone Wiesenthal, who's gone now. Great shame. And it led to the threatening of a lawsuit and picketing in Washington, in POW outfits, and the whole works. They looked around for a suitable candidate. At that time, I wasn't a citizen. They had considered me, but I wasn't eligible. I am now a citizen. And so they appointed William Duna, who taught at St. Thomas University in St. Paul. And it was very difficult for him. He would come back after a meeting, council meeting, practically in tears, and call me and say, I just feel worthless, the way they spoke to me and shunned me. At the end of his term, by that time I'd become a U.S. citizen, and Clinton appointed me, and I encountered the same thing. There was really very little support coming. There was practically nothing in the museum, which was hurtful. Lots of pictures of Roma on the walls in the camps, not identified as Roma. In order to find out that the prisoners depicted were in fact Roma, you would have to go into the closed files, into the offices which the public don't have access to. They had a display, I think it's still there. It's a dress and a wagon and a violin. It's very Hollywood. They would never, and still do not, use the word Holocaust in any of the literature referring to the fate of the Romani victims. They still won't use it. It's a private word. We were openly insulted. I was told on one occasion that if I wanted to attend a meeting, I would have to behave myself. It's very insulting, going to a senior academic. We were called cranks, we were called eccentrics, we were called naive. All of this shows up in the newspaper reports. You can check this for yourself. I mean, I don't want to get into a litany of insults. You can check on them if you want, but that's all attributable to their misunderstanding of who and what we are. One past chairman, Benjamin Mead, wondered whether we were in fact an ethnic group. He said, you are, you know, you're not a people. So, I mean, that simply illustrated the fact that we were being judged on the basis of a perceived behavior, regardless of the fact that each of us was a university professor. Nevertheless, the Hollywood gypsy image overrode that. Now, of course, years later, they know a lot more. We did have a champion, Sybil Milton, who passed away and greatly missed. She was their senior historian. She is the one who has said, the first one to say that our losses may have been as high as 1.5 million. They are still pushing the 200,000 figure. What we understand is that 1.5 million probably is much closer to the number. And a couple of other sources have given that same number. What was disappointing was the fact that during the coffee breaks, when I'd be standing off to one side, sometimes this or that member would come up and privately express disappointment, let's say, that the council was being so cold-shouldered. But the same people would never speak up in our behalf in the actual council meetings. They would say, oh, this is terrible, they should treat you better than this. But they'd leave it at that. When Bush became president, he removed 11 of us who had been Clinton appointees. And that's over 10 years ago. But he didn't look for a Republican Romani representative to replace me, and still hasn't. And Obama hasn't. I've been writing. I get these form letters back. Thank you for your support for our party, all Americans, you know, that kind of thing. That's disappointing too. I've tried to go through Congress people. I've written to Hillary Clinton. We're not getting anywhere.
You addressed this a little bit, but what is it about this idea, the Holocaust term, the idea of it all, that the Romani are excluded? I mean, there is no invitation, there's no interest in being under the umbrella of the Holocaust terminology. Could you address that? What's that about?
I think if we're looking at the victims of the Nazis, this is a very, very broad set of categories. They even, on their list of targeted groups, there were even outspoken German women, feminists, who were sterilized. So we have that. We have Roman Catholics, we have Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, trades union people, etc., Poles, of course, Afro-Europeans. And by the way, the Afro-Europeans were dispatched very efficiently and quickly, even before 1939. But they were those who were around in the 30s were targeted immediately as soon as Hitler became chancellor in 1933. He passed a law about interbreeding with Jews, Negroes, and Gypsies. Once again, this genetic contaminant thing. So the way we have been treated or classified has, and pretty much still is, in with a group of, quotes, others, which is to say plus or minus Jewish. But putting us in others puts us with German feminists and Jehovah's Witnesses, as though we shared the same fate. If we're going to make a kind of distinction like this, we're talking about genocide. And genocide now, of course, is a hot term. And only Roma and Jews were singled out for genocidal action to eradicate these populations within the German-controlled area. So if we have to make an us and them distinction, and if we are really concerned with genocide, then it is simply wrong, academically wrong, historically wrong, to otherize us. Because if we do that, we have to say what they did to Roma was different from what they did to Jews. And what they did to Roma was for reasons other than the reasons they had for destroying the Jews. When we look at the facts, there's no difference. We were there every step of the way. We counted as Untermenschen, as subhumans, along with Jews, after the Nuremberg laws in 1935. The references to both populations crop up over and over again in the context of race. It's simply poor scholarship, apart from anything else, to put us in a different category. If we think about the category of Jews as opposed to everyone else, then we have to ask why. What is different? You can take a religious perspective, Jews as chosen people. Whether that bothered the Nazis or not, that may have been a factor. But the end result was shared, was the same. And more prominent people are saying that publicly. The German Chancellor, various people who've studied the Holocaust are concluding that the fate of Jews in Roma was the same, for the same reasons.
There's some critics I've read who claim that the Jewish claim to uniqueness in the Holocaust harkens back to religious roots, the chosen people, the idea of uniqueness, specialness, and there's some other critics say a lot of this uniqueness harkens back to it's necessary for the politics of Israel. Do you have any idea or opinion about those things?
Well, obviously I've heard them all, and I've written about them. The chosen people, there are various religious groups around the world who claim to be the chosen people, God's chosen people. I have some friends who are Church of Christ. They believe firmly that they are the only ones who God is going to let into heaven. Out of all the world, they are chosen. Non-Christians groups believe that Christians aren't going to make it to heaven. Other groups think if Jews won't make it to heaven because they're not whatever. So I can understand that there are that it's fundamental to the Jewish perspective that they are the chosen people. The Bible says that. Whether in fact they are is not for me to say. From the Christian point of view, they are. How that relates to the ultimate destruction of Roma as well as Jews is harder to explain. As for Israel, there are whole chapters in books about this, that somehow admitting other populations dilutes the Jewish claim to a homeland. I think that's nonsense, frankly. There should be a Jewish homeland, should be Israel. And the fact that we want recognition in the history books doesn't detract from that at all, and it shouldn't. And anybody who thinks we should keep our mouths shut because of the existence of Israel is taking a very hard line against us, even a racist one.
Dale, that's my next question. You have said you said you've experienced an element of racism evident in the Jewish response. Could you elaborate on some examples and what do you think that's about?
I have been told by three people, I could name them, I won't name them, at the museum and on the council, privately, that they hear, God forbid we should be associated with Gypsies. We're going to be judged by the company we keep, that attitude. There's just a prejudice against Roma. And I certainly saw it. Bill Duna certainly saw it. We had to listen to comments that one would scarcely make to a professional colleague. But we're Gypsies. And so we're just open to this kind of attitude. And it's there.
Is this from all ethnic members of the council, or specific?
Well, as I say, I've only heard it from a couple of people. There are people on the council, and this is a bit surprising. When I was there, we had Armenian representation, African American representation. There was a trade union rep on there, appointee. Armenians weren't in the Holocaust. African Americans had been dispatched, or not African Americans, but Afro-Europeans and Africans in Europe. And yet we weren't allowed onto the council. There's something I wanted to say there, and I've lost it.
Well, let me ask. You recite this the story of a Hillel meeting. Some woman jumped up and started yelling at you. Could you discuss that? Do you recall that?
Oh, if I can remember that. Somebody called out something. Well, I mean, I hear a number of these things. Somebody said I would never read a book on the Holocaust written by a Gypsy, or I think so.
Well, you mentioned, I read this in two places, I think. You said at one presentation I gave at a Hillel Center, I was interrupted by a woman who leaped to her feet and demanded angrily why I was even comparing the Gypsy case to the Jewish, when Jews had given so much to the world and Gypsies.
Oh
were-
yes,
Is
yes,
he
yes.
la-
Yeah, I
la-
remember
tell me
that. That was
please.
in at Texas A&M University, because she evidently knew nothing about Gypsies other than what she learned from the media, from fictional media.
Could you tell me what exactly happened, please?
Well, I was taken aback by this because it was an affront, and I said, and I actually something similar, not quite as harsh as this, but a few months ago we had here on campus a workshop for teachers from around the country. It was a workshop on ethnic sensitivity in the classroom and so on, and there was an older man and woman sitting together in the middle of the auditorium, and the woman said, "What about this image of that I remember from the 50s, Gypsies coming through town in their horse-drawn wagons with all their possessions hanging off the back of their wagon?" And I said, "Is this something you saw?" "No." "Where did you get this image from?" "Well, from movies and books." And I thought, I didn't say this because it was at the very end of the session. I should have said, well, first of all, you didn't see this. You're relying on a fictional image. Secondly, you could very well be describing your own ancestors who came west, opening up this country in horse-drawn wagons with their possessions hanging off the back. There's something that bothered her. Something unreal bothered her. Certainly, our ancestors moved from place to place in horse-drawn wagons with their possessions tied onto the wagons. Absolutely. But why would that image be so disturbing? And when this woman in the audience said, what have your people done when my people have done so much? As though that alone would be a reason to exclude a victimhood. It's another kind of victimhood, obviously. But here was a woman who knew nothing about Roma. She knew a lot about Gypsies, but she knew nothing about Roma. She knew nothing about what the situation was for Roma in Nazi Germany, or the history leading up to it, going back to 1407. So this is what we're having to deal with.
Okay, could you discuss Eli Wiesel? I don't know how to pronounce his name, but for example, you wrote quite a bit, and there are some allegations, for example, about the capo who supposedly the Roman.
Oh, I'd rather not talk about that.
Okay, all right. What about the issue of you raised the issue in terms of forgiveness and stuff, that there was supposed participation of Jews in the liquidation of Gypsies in Ustica in 1942. Recall that the issue is forgiveness, and if forgiveness is not afforded to that capo or something, there are some allegations that Jews were even involved. I mean, it's much more complicated over there than the kind of mythologies of black and white everywhere. Could you elaborate on this issue, please?
Well, you bring up forgiveness. It takes a very strong person sometimes to forgive such atrocities. And you would have to be a spiritual person, I think, to be able to forgive them the horrors, what people have done and what people continue to do. I suppose it's a personal decision. It's down to the individual if they can find it in them. Of course, it's the nobler path to take is to forgive. Whether the individual can or not is up to that individual.
Could you touched on this a bit, but could you elaborate on this notion of sort of a hierarchy of suffering under the Nazis, the tiers of victimhood, and with the Jewish Holocaust at the top? Could you elaborate on that? Your sense of that?
Well, I do have a chapter in my latest book. It's a reprint of one that appeared in earlier years, but it's responses. And what I did in that chapter was bring together all of the arguments I've heard personally or read as to why the Jewish experience was different from the Romani experience, and why, because of that, we don't qualify as victims of the Holocaust. And I have quite a few, and some of them we've already talked about, the existence of Israel and the religious argument. And really, you should perhaps look at the list. One, of course, is numbers, and I've talked about that. 6 million, 1.5 million. Even if we stay with 200,000, which of course is a ridiculously low figure, I would prefer it to be 200,000 Romani victims. The fewer the better, obviously. But it's a peculiar kind of one-upmanship to use numbers, particularly, as I've said, when the numbers didn't match to begin with. If the numbers had been the same, the number of Jews in Europe and the number of Roma in Europe had been the same to start with in 1933, then we can talk about numbers. But even then, talking about numbers detracts from the humanity. So the objection from some quarters is to the definition of Holocaust. Holocaust is used, it's a very old term as it happens. It was applied to the burning down of a Christian church in Europe in long time ago. I've put the date. The word itself is hundreds of years old. Its application to the Nazi program of genocide is much later, obviously, post 45. But it's still used a lot. I have a book in my library on the Black Holocaust, which would be the Atlantic slave trade. There are certainly people who would say, you can't use that word, not for that. So now we have small h Holocaust and capital H Holocaust. We have, my personal feeling is that if we use our group-specific words, we can get away from this fighting over a label. If we say Shoah for the Jewish Holocaust and Porajmos for the Romani Holocaust, then we can talk about these events. Not at the top level, but at the next level down. The top level would be the genocide itself. But then what that means and meant for Jews and what it means and meant for Roma, very personal, distinctive. The losses, the personal losses, family members, property, can be dealt with in a personal way with no need to compare and compete.